Good morning, everybody. Can we pick topics or what? Uh, Election security. Welcome to our September 24th breakfast briefing for Represent PA. If you don't know me, I'm Christine Jacobs, and I'm the Executive Director of Represent PA. Our goal is to flip the Pennsylvania legislature blue with strong, progressive, powerful women, so we can really make a difference in the Commonwealth this year. We're in talking about election security, great topic. We're going to be blessed with three wonderful speakers today. Gwen Camp is a security consultant. She runs a political management firm and has extensive experience all over, both in Washington and in Pennsylvania. We're also going to be joined by State Representative Wendy Ullman, who's in her first term. She represents parts of Bucks County. She's a former English professor and serves on a variety of committees, including state government. And we decided that state government is a major topic of interest. And Wendy is, we were very, very proud to support Wendy last cycle in both her primary and in her general election. And we're very proud of the work she's doing, and as you will be when you hear her. We also going to have Ashley McBride, and Ashley McBride is the For Our Future Pennsylvania State Director and has long time been a voting rights advocate, and she'll talk about other issues that we can see this year. So, you know, voting rights are the big issue everybody's talking about, but let me give you a little bit of background on Represent. We have so far in 2020, we've supported 53 candidates with over $450,000. You have to, I can remind you that in last cycle, in the 2018 election, we invested $200,000 in races. And we fully expect to hit over the $500,000 mark this cycle with some fabulous candidates. Our candidates represent 25 counties from throughout Pennsylvania, including 15 predominantly red counties. And I mention that because we support candidates we think can win, and we're seeing the possibility of flipping seats throughout the Commonwealth. We believe that unless we take a statewide view, many of the founders of this organization, we're from the Philadelphia area, but we believe that we need to take a statewide view because I'm always going to be represented by a Democrat from where I sit in Philly. But I want to make sure that my voice and the voices of all the many, many women who support us are going to be heard in Harrisburg. And that only happens if we flip the legislature. Some of the things we're proud of so far this cycle are that several candidates have told us that they are the reason that they've made it to the fall ballot. You know, we need to flip 9 House seats in order to take the majority, and we're aiming to flip at least 4 Senate seats. 4 will take us to a tie, which can be, you know, and the tie can be decided on by John Fetterman. 2 of our Senate candidates, Janet Diaz and Julie Slomski, both had competitive primaries, and they've told us that without Represent support, they would not have made it to the fall ballot. You know, I mentioned that Wendy Ullman is on. We supported Wendy in her primary last cycle, and she won by, I think it was 80-something votes in her primary, and then went on to win the general election. In addition to providing candidates funding, we provide a sense of community for all of the women running for office and a culture of trust, in addition, as I said, in addition to our dollars. We've heard great stories from many of the candidates on things that have been said to them on the campaign trail, and we give them a forum for doing that. We believe in these women, and we go by the password that women have a chance if we give them a chance. The other thing you should know is why, you know, when we talk about why women, let's look at this slide. These are the women that we're supporting this year. Don't you think Ruth Bader Ginsburg would be very proud of this work? Because of her work, because of her pioneering work on equality for women, these are the kind of women that we're getting to run for office. We're very proud, as I keep saying, we're very proud of this movement. Going into the 2018 elections, women were only 18% of the seats in Harrisburg between the House and Senate, 18%. And it had been roughly that level for several cycles. After the 2018 election, we went from 18% women to over 26% women in our state legislature. And that's made a huge difference. Women are now in leadership roles on the Democratic caucus. They are speaking out on issues of importance. After this cycle, with the help of these wonderful women you see here, we expect that the legislature will go over 30% women after the 2020 election. And very importantly, the Democratic caucus in both the House and in the Senate will go to about 40% women. Don't you think our voices will be heard then? We maintain a list of what we call our big issues in the state, and we have a long list of issues related to education and the environment and things that we think are important to us and that don't get enough play in the press. And so you don't really realize how poorly the legislators in Harrisburg are representing you. The one that I usually cite first is that Pennsylvania has the biggest discrepancy in funding between rich and poor school districts in the entire country, because of the way we primarily rely on property taxes. That is not right, and that is not what we want for this Commonwealth. But when you look at what's going on in elections, dark money continues to pour into Pennsylvania. We have no spending limits on no campaign limits on how much money special interest groups and individuals can give to candidates in Pennsylvania. No limits. The legislature acts in the way of big business. And we actually had the head of the Labor and Industry Committee in the House say that it is not the government's job to keep us safe. It is not the government's job to keep us safe. I think that should be a surprise to all of you to know that that's not their job. And this was in a discussion about the pandemic. There's been a lot of discussion about Pennsylvania elections in the news. These are just headlines that I took out of the Inquirer recently. Many Pennsylvania election rules are still up in the air with 2 months to go because of what's going on between the legislature and the courts. Now, we believe that happily that Trump's war on mail-in voting suffered a setback in Pennsylvania. But if you've been listening to the news the last few weeks, in the last few days, we're heading into troubled times. Republican lawmakers slammed the PA Supreme Court rulings on election, and they said it's about allowing one party to steal this election, where we really believe that having everybody vote should be the goal of all Pennsylvanians, and indeed all American citizens. And so what I'd like to do right now is, I've made some comments about the Pennsylvania legislature as part of this discussion, but what better person to hear it from is State Representative Wendy Ullman, who's on the State Government Committee for the House. And she can tell you what it's like trying to make sure that the vote is defended and where these laws stand currently in the legislature. Wendy, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me, Christine. This is timely in the extreme. I have the privilege, responsibility of serving on the State Government Committee, which is ground zero for all things dealing with voting and law changes. And it is a unusually rancorous committee. But at the same time, I think good things had the potential. So I'm just going to run through this in terms of what was done, what was attempted to be done with the issue of voting reform to make voting both easier and more secure in Pennsylvania. Part of the problem came because we didn't have all the important data on how well things were working until after the primary, which did not happen until early in June, which was much delayed. At that point, we all on that committee realized that there were improvements that were necessary to make it easier to vote and appropriately secure to vote with either mail-in or it's still tagging along absentee ballots. And we were very hopeful in July or end of June, mid-June, we had a big planned committee meeting to discuss a bill which was put forth, I believe it was chaired by Garth Everett, the Republican chair, that was going to be specifically on voting reforms that would address the shortcomings that we all saw during the primary. Unfortunately, it turned into not something to deal with pandemic issues, but with political issues. What we were presented with was the potential for voting reform without any details, and the promise that we would have meetings over the summer to hash out several important issues. We discussed issues in that June meeting. There were plans. In fact, the Democratic committee people talked and worked among themselves, trying to collect information so that we would be prepared over the summer to present a basically agreed to filled out omnibus bill, which would address shortcomings which needed to be addressed. It was a good idea. At the same time, there was a generous element of suspicion. So it passed on a party line vote. That the basic bill passed with the discussion that amendments would be added. It was 15 to 10, 15 Republicans, 10 Democrats against. And then we were awaiting the discussions over the summer to add the amendments, which would flesh it out and be agreed upon as far as good things. The things that we wanted to have discussed were being able to open ballots before, mail-in ballots before Election Day. I want to be mindful of time. The potential for a logjam is that the machines that count, that tabulate the ballots, can do so very, very efficiently and quickly, but the physical requirement to open first one and then a second envelope requires a passage of seconds that require human hands. It could be as much as 30 seconds per ballot when we're talking hundreds of thousands of ballots upon the small number of employees of the courthouse who are designated those ballot openers. It was obviously going to be a terrible logjam. So we wanted that. We wanted to identify the information for every county about the ability to use drop boxes. Some counties use them, other counties did not. It should be consistent, it should be statewide, it shouldn't be left up to counties. The whole security envelope, we wanted to readdress. That means that when you vote by any way other than in person, 2 envelopes are required. And I know this is an issue that's still being talked about. It does give that level of security that the ballot, which has a scan, matches the security envelope, which has that scan, and then the outside envelope does not in any way identify it with the voter. So it is a level of security that I think we agree is necessary, but of course, people have to know that they have to put their ballot in an envelope and then in the next envelope. We wanted to have some discussion of signatures. I don't know about you, but I registered to vote in Pennsylvania. I'm thinking it was probably 1978. I can guarantee my signature has changed since then. In fact, I keep having to remember, did I use my middle name or my middle initial? We wanted clear language on making sure that we all agreed how to deal with signatures that did not match. And then of course the spoiling process, which is very poor phraseology. If someone comes in with their ballot but wants to vote in process or in person, we wanted to have consistent rules that we could telegraph, communicate, and educate about so that every voter knew exactly what would happen. And the same thing that happens in Bucks County happens in Elk County. So those were some of the issues that we wanted to address, as well as where vote tabulation would occur and the deadline for vote tabulation. What happened was, although Democrats met in person, I personally brought I personally talked to my supervisors in my county and got different information together. We were not consulted, and we were presented with a very Republican skewed set of amendments, and given the traditional 24 hours to read, comprehend, digest, and vote on. And of course, every single amendment that the Republicans put up there passed, because that's how it works. So, and then the whole bill passed, and they had an amendment that basically tipped the whole thing on its head. So that's what happened. And the result has been that there's a lot of issues. I think one of the biggest ones is that in their bill, they made it sound good as voting reform, that yes, there is that 2-week provision under the bill that was passed, well, that was passed but then did not become law, was that there would be a 2-week period for opening the ballots that came in by mail, which is desirable. But along with that, there was the elimination of drop boxes and a completely new provision, which has credible potential for voter intimidation, is that of poll watchers. Poll watchers are people who have to be certified, and traditionally they have to be, I think at one point they had to be within the voting precinct congressional wise. I know it's for sure it's been the county. In other words, anyone in Bucks County can be a poll watcher and go watch as an observer in any polling place in Bucks County. This changed it so that anyone who is registered to vote in the state of Pennsylvania can be a poll watcher anywhere. So again, Elk County, hop in the car, come watch voting in Pennsylvania. This is part of the voter intimidation playbook used in the South to suppress voting. It's just unacceptable, unnecessary, so we voted against it. So the net result of this is massive confusion, misinformation, intentional disinformation, and sowing of distrust. The other issues are that we also wanted to talk about giving counties money to train workers, hire more workers, without appropriating the money to make this happen. Our counties are pulling money out of places where they don't have it to make this happen. Our counties are unable to educate our voters because it is arcane. There are a lot of rules, and particularly the envelope within the envelope. They have to be educated on that. There's another area which is a potential challenge. If you vote in person, which we have always been able to do that, you get the ballot, you can vote in the courthouse and hand it back to work. Well, obviously there's a great deal of control for that. But the rules are that when you go to a drop box, which in my county, and I don't know if this is happening elsewhere, there will be a sheriff or someone from some security person standing there so that those boxes are in fact secure. I have heard cases of people collecting for their family members, for their neighbors, and going and dropping them into the drop box. Well, that's not exactly kosher. You can't do that, and it could be challenged. And people don't know that. I mean, you could pick up your neighbor's mail and go down to your post office, but the rules are in those secure voting places, you can't do that. And there are legitimate historical reasons that this is a problem, and that's what we wanted to do, is to make sure that the rules were ironed out and that we had ample time to communicate. As it is, even from the state level, mostly we're communicating latest change, this is what it means, latest change, this is what it means, and the ability to give clear, simple repetitions of how to do this has been jumbled. We're still reeling from trying to get our ballots printed because of the recent Supreme Court ruling. So I think yeah.
Wendy, do you think that this is, but we're still going to be able to, you know, what we're going to talk about for the rest of the call is how are we going to adapt to all of these changes that are coming? Is there something you want to make sure that our other speakers address in terms of calming people down?
Tell them it is in fact safe. Tell them that they should vote by mail if that is safe for them to do. Tell them that there is a process. If they don't get their ballot in time, there is a process that can be followed. And just go to the polls, explain what the situation is, and a poll worker will accommodate their desire to vote. That there are ways to do it. Don't let it keep you home. And I see a lot of questions. Let's go on to the next person.
Okay, thank you so much, Wendy. I think that we all understand that you're up against a lot of difficulties in Harrisburg, and we so appreciate that you're fighting for Pennsylvanians. I want to remind you that part of the goal of Represent is to send the reinforcements in so that we can put you in the majority next time. So thank you, Wendy. And are you able to stay on, or do you have to go on? Okay, that's great. So we may have questions for you later. Thank you. Ashley McBride, welcome to a Represent call. I understand you're working for, you know, on the challenges and the obstacles. What are you seeing as the big obstacles that, you know, some of which Wendy has laid out? What are you seeing in your world?
Absolutely, and I want to thank the representative for all of her hard work, and certainly you, Christine, for making this happen, and Represent for all of the amazing work and the support that you give to candidates. I think we are in a raging pandemic, an economic recession that has decimated state and local budgets, critical poll worker shortages, the fear of long lines at polling locations, a mail system that is beset by politics, and just the disinformation campaigns that the representative mentioned. Election officials or administrators across the state have been walking the tightrope for a while when it comes to smooth voting process, but the sheer number of obstacles that they face this year will pose one of the greatest challenges to the voting infrastructure in recent memory. Chief among those challenges is, again, we are dealing with a persistent virus that can make the physical proximity deadly, has altered the course of our voter behavior. What started out as a year-long effort by election officials and cybersecurity experts to secure in-person voting by both in machines and the polling stations themselves, in a matter of months has morphed into an urgent scramble to set up state and local infrastructure capable of handling massive vote by mail applications. An increasing proportion of poll workers are, for whatever reason, we know that a number of our poll workers have been our seniors and are unable to do that. And it further complicates the efforts for many counties to facilitate in-person voting. So while some of our local officials have been very vocal in their frustrations, I think that we can say without a doubt that Democrats in both the House and Senate have worked tirelessly to make sure that the resources are coming down to counties and that they have the support that is necessary. The greatest threat, I believe, that is facing vote by mail comes not just from the process itself, but what we see is the manipulation of public perception of that process by both domestic and foreign actors. As the representative mentioned, there's so much different disinformation out there, or misinformation about the process that seeks to instill fear. And the threat actors have leveraged this limited understanding regarding mailing and voting process to mislead and confuse the public. Chief among those culprits, unfortunately, is the sitting president of the United States, who has waged a relentless and evidence-free campaign to undermine confidence in vote by mail, as public polling continues to show wide disparities in voting preferences of those who are likely to utilize vote by mail this year. You know, again, we look back and we just recently celebrated 100 years of the suffrage movement, women obtaining their right to vote, their long denied right to vote. The 19th Amendment has reshaped American politics politics, but women's unfettered access to political rights still remains in question. On one hand, we see that women across this state and across this country are heading to polls in just historical numbers, a higher proportion of women eligible to vote than men in recent elections, well, really in every presidential election since 1980. On the other hand, the amendment was not designed to address intersecting identities, particularly those involving race. And when we look at these disinformation campaigns that are sought both by foreign and domestic actors, we know that there are women who are targeted in these conversations, but we're happy to say here in Pennsylvania that the number of women who have signed up to vote by mail are actually outnumber men. And so that is, again, the work of this organization who has shared the importance of it. Today, women are more likely to vote for Democrats than Republican candidates, which we know, and they are more active when it comes to being involved in the process. When we talk about how we can get involved, I think one of the major things is that we see in the organization that I work for, we have lots of volunteers, but the overwhelming majority of them are women who are working, who are professionals, who have families, who have other responsibilities, but are saying that this election is so important that they're going to carve out time and be intentional about giving back time to support candidates. We know that it's just simply, for those of us in this work, it's harder to be heard as a woman. And when I think about voting gives us an opportunity to make sure that our voice is heard. Women historically haven't always had the right to vote. So it's so important to recognize the power that is in our vote. I would like, if, again, I know that we're a few minutes behind, but I just want to tell you a personal story. I do this work because I was raised by my grandmother, who was born in Selma, Alabama in 1909. She didn't obtain the right to vote until many years later, and she talks about what the Voting Rights Act meant to her. I remember the excitement as I held her hand and we entered the voting booth. It was something that I grew up in South Georgia, and my grandmother was intentional about waiting until I got out of school to go vote. In Georgia, they didn't close schools down for voting. And I remember holding her hand in what it is that she instilled in me. And I also remember the power of that little I voted sticker that so many people take for granted. And so I do this work because of her. And I'm invested in this fight because of her, because of my mother, because of my daughter and my nieces. I'm committed to the security of this election for the top of the ticket, yes, for Biden and Harris, but to make sure that we protect every woman we elected to Congress in 2018, for Nina Ahmad, for the protection of every Democratic female incumbent in the Pennsylvania House and Senate, for Julie, Emily, Melissa, Sharon, Michelle, Patricia, Brittany, Joanna, Nancy, Deborah, Anne Marie, and so many others. And so again, we want to join and represent. Thank you so much for all of the support and hard work. Certainly happy to answer any questions when that time comes.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much for being with us, Ashley. One of the things that we at Represent talk about, have I asked for money yet in this call? We view it to be voting with your purse. You not only have to vote in person where your one vote counts, you not only have to volunteer for organizations to pull together friends and other people in the area to go vote and make sure that it counts, but you also have, if you're able to, you should vote with your purse. Send money to Represent, send money to individual candidates. Money is speech. I remember I mentioned before that in Pennsylvania, there are no limits. In 2010, there was an organization run by the Koch brothers that sent a lot of money to Pennsylvania to try and influence the Pennsylvania State House elections, so that when redistricting happened after the 2000 census, Pennsylvania would go largely Republican in its representation, despite the fact that it's a 50-50 state in terms of registration. And they were very effective. We have to fight that in 2020. It's important. The Republicans are voting with their wallets. We can vote with our purses. And now I'd like to bring on Gwen Camp. And Gwen is going to talk to you about how secure should we feel. There was an article in the Atlantic yesterday that has us all, nervous. Chris Hayes talked about with the author of the article yesterday, all about what Trump's strategy is to invalidate the elections. Gwen, tell us we should be secure, feel secure. Tell us that we have people fighting for us so that as we go vote, our votes will count.
Oh man, I mean, we have so many people fighting for us, and because of Represent, we have this community, right? So one thing I think to remember is when we are contributing to, every day is going to be a nightmare story. Every day from here until December, until Inauguration Day, is going to be a new nightmare story. And we have to get right with ourselves, because you know that you are the people that your family, your communities look to, because you're an expert. You've been doing this work for a long time. When we contribute to the confusion, we are using the Trump-Putin talking points. Like Vladimir Putin down to Donald Trump should not be coming out of Represent Ladies' mouths. Like, that is not our job. So I think that Jamie has some slides if you want to pull them up, and I'll get us back on track for timing. No slides. Can I share mine? Okay. So yeah, let me just do it, because I do think we should move quickly. And I know, Chris, I am really amazed that you haven't asked for that much money yet. Okay, I blatantly stole some slides from other groups, because I also don't believe that any of us should be replicated. We should not be spending any of our time replicating great stuff. So my overarching message is that everyone has a job this election, and everybody who's done something and has been part of it, it's great, but we have to kick it up to 11 like nobody's business. And some of it is just really boring and saying facts and being against that, you know, all of this Trump-Putin machine. It's not happening. 40 days, Jesus had a hard time in the desert for 40 days. It's going to be a hard 40 days, but we can do this, right? Like, take your strength from wherever you take it. I think we've talked a lot about we don't need to scare everybody everything, but it is a really odd year. So I actually started this work back in February, in the before times, because I'm trained as an emergency manager. I spent 5 years in the Obama administration at FEMA trying to overhaul that. And we knew that from just Act 77, from just a lot of the wonderful women that you elected to county offices in 2019, new voting machines, new laws, new elected officials, just Act 77, they hired an emergency manager to come in and help with this, right? And that was like 6 disasters/crises to go. So I think Wendy has covered a lot of that. Ashley has flagged a lot of this too. But all of these things are things that we can break down into jobs. There's plenty of legal protections, and of course we don't need a law school lesson here. But one of the things I did want to shout out is all of the great work that's always been happening. So, we have the hotlines, we have the ACLU doing great work, we have Common Cause doing great work, we have the campaigns, but again, we're going to need some extra kicking it up. And so I have some asks. Of course, Chris is great at asking for money. I'm great at asking for action. So we will have places that that you can get involved, but also like everyone should also have a job. And I think one great way, when Audre Lorde used to start her speeches, a lot of times she would say, I'm doing my work and I'm here to make sure that you're doing yours. And I would just invite everyone to start every conversation you have for the next 40 days with her words, because that is true. We all have a job. So election protection, things we're very familiar with, still happening. I threw this one in before Breonna Taylor's ruling yesterday, which is so heartbreaking, just to kind of indicate how our voting here in Pennsylvania is a little bit different than everybody else's. So in PA, or in Philly, I live in Philly, so I do use a lot of examples here, but in Philly, we didn't even have ADA compliant polling places. Every polling place was not ADA compliant up until a couple of years ago. And the last few, we kept kind of saying like, this is wrong. This is a real problem. And we didn't actually get them ADA compliant until the new machines, which are giant and clunky, needed to be moved in. And then we needed curb cuts and ramps. So that's the kind of non-people focused voting setup that we have. So we're really trying to change that. And obviously all of the women that we help elect getting into places like Wendy and being in that room. I mean, we've talked about without a lot of these women sitting in these committees, we wouldn't even know what's going on. We just get to see the straight party line vote at the end. So really having people in those rooms is huge. And obviously with Breonna Taylor and that ruling yesterday that there's a charge for the drywall of the apartment, like, so we care about that more than a woman's life. Like, that's insane, but that's common all over the place, including how Pennsylvania voting laws are structured. So of course, COVID, of course, the new, these are regular county workers. They're normal people. Like, they did not sign up to be superheroes. So we have invested tens of millions of dollars from out of state into the counties. Democracy is messy on purpose. It's actually great that it's very decentralized. It's actually great that our counties run them themselves. It's also a little bit terrifying that the Commonwealth can only give us guidance or suggestions, right? Like, it would be nice to have some standards of excellence while maintaining that commitment to democracy being very localized. But I will tell you, through the Center for Tech and Civic Life, through the Center for Secure and Modern Elections, through the Zuckerberg-Chan Foundation, we are now up to like 25 that we've brought back into counties to do things like open those envelopes faster so there's not confusion, or the period of confusion is limited. So lots of folks are working on that. So don't stress about the things that you can't do, just think about the things that you can do. And it's probably going to be in your neighborhood and your family. The misinformation and disinformation is super real. And also, even this morning on the radio, the president's talking about election fraud, and the number of times that the reporters have to find a way to say which is untrue is getting very creative. So I really feel for our brothers and sisters who are reporters. General Assembly, obviously, as Wendy said, it would be great. It was so good to see for the primary that there was some general consensus around, I think it was like a third of all polling places pre-COVID were actually senior centers or retirement centers or retirement homes across the state. That's something that everyone can agree that would be super irresponsible to do, right? So they did come a long way in pulling off the primary, but I think, as Wendy kind of pointed out, we pulled off the primary. It's not the standard of excellence that we want to be at with November with all of these changes. So definitely, it's just us. We can't count on these Republicans in the state house and the state senate. It's just us, so we really have to organize on the ground. I'm going to be real with you. I don't think that we win this election unless it's a blowout. Like, that's what we're working with. There's no margin of victory that is too big. Like, we cannot eke this out by a 0.5 percentage point. We have to be talking to people who, for very good reason, do not trust voting by mail and other new systems. We have to be organizing in a pretty old school way, which can be really hard as we're doing it all through the Zoom. So super important deadlines. I just want to point out the golden window, we call it, the last day to register to vote, the last day to apply for a mail-in ballot. The ballots are going to start going out probably this week, even as early. Allegheny and Elk are going to be the first two. When there is ballots in the field and early vote centers open, and you can also walk into your county election office, but that's like not convenient for everyone, obviously. People can actually do all of it at once, and we call that the golden window. Is if a non-registered person wants to go in, they can register for mail, they can register to vote, they can get their vote by mail. And in the early vote centers, I think a lot of us kind of pictured it being like this, like the voting machines, like you go in and like it's a voting machine. You actually just get it's like a flat vote by mail. Hopefully there will be stickers. I love the stickers. Ashley's so right. They really are powerful. And they actually polled really importantly as well. So with those early vote centers, it's a great opportunity to get everybody registered, voting, dropped off. The mail system is totally safe, but if people are gonna feel better using drop boxes, we also just secured 250 drop boxes because we were hearing from counties that they were hard to find. So we have drop boxes that we'll try and get out. And then obviously Election Day. After Election Day, and we can clearly see where I ran out of time to do cute slides or steal them from other people, I wanted to flag 3 things that you should be aware of just to help you sleep a little bit better at night. So election night, obviously, we're not gonna know who the president is. And we need to get very right with that, with every reporter we talk to, with all of our community meetings, everything else. So since we can accept the ballots that are postmarked by Tuesday until Friday, that is likely when some of the smaller counties will be done. The smaller counties are more red. The smaller counties are voting in person because their president is telling them that COVID's not a real thing. So the blue slide is real. It is definitely a concern that President Trump will declare victory when he in fact does not have it, which is why we're asking everybody to vote by mail or by the drop boxes, but also do it very early to make life less horrible for these folks who are trying to do a fast count. By November 18th, the election will be certified. And then our beautiful electoral college comes in. So this is another reason to fight like hell for our state leg candidates. It is so important, right? And as we are looking at different emergency planning scenarios, it is going to matter not just who wins the presidency, but who wins the Senate indeed as well. And of course, with our beloved RBG, just so brutal, such a heartbreak. But also our democracy shouldn't hinge on a tiny little woman who has served us so much for so long and given us so much. That's insane. So making a more resilient one is definitely contributing to all of this. Into Inauguration Day, Chris mentioned the story in the Atlantic about what if we have two guys show up to be inaugurated and one has all the trappings of the presidency and is the commander-in-chief of the military. We will think through all of those like disaster scenarios so you don't have to think about them, just focus on getting a blowout. And for every single one of us having a job this election, and I'll throw these up in the chat, this is where our job is a little bit unsexy. J.J. Abrams, that's the guy who directed Star Wars. J.J. Abbott was Governor Wolf's press secretary. He started Commonwealth Communications, and they are awesome. So what they have done is they're taking all of the messaging and using the same exact words so that for all of our groups, we're not saying puppies for small dogs or whatever. In looking at it, would I edit and change a couple words? Yes, and we're saying, actually, don't do any of that. If we're gonna talk about naked ballots, if we're gonna talk about vote by mail, like let's all use the same words all the time and we can use our different colors and fonts, etc. Poll workers, as Ashley pointed out very brilliantly, we don't get to have an election day without poll workers. You can sign up there. The compensation is generous. In Philly, it's $200 for the day and an extra $50 if you do the training. And then there's all kinds of other election monitoring. So I'll throw these up in the chat, but it's gonna be a wild ride. It's gonna be all about, and what I really like about how JJ structured it is that every week, and you can sign up for these emails that you'll get every week. It's saying like, this week, our most important message is about voting by mail. This week, our most important message is that you're running out of time for vote by mail. This week is what, so it's like really, really organized and great and easy to understand. And I think that is it. So I will turn it back over to Chris.
Thank you so much. And thank you to all of our speakers. I want to give you, I want to recap what I've heard because some of the questions keep coming up, and then Helen will send some questions on to our speakers. First of all, what I heard was, if you apply to vote by mail, please do that. Don't let them scare you. Don't use the Republican talking points that ballots are not going to be counted. Apply for your mail-in ballot. When you get it, fill it in as quickly as you can, and if you don't feel comfortable with the post office, take it to a drop box. There will be drop boxes all over the Commonwealth. You can find them online. You can call the PA Dems voter hotline and they'll tell you where the local drop box is. I happen to know because I'm a hotline person periodically. I do shifts there just to find out what voters are asking. Do it. Don't let them scare you away from voting by mail. In Pennsylvania, you cannot, as Gwen said, in Pennsylvania, you cannot, quote, vote early. You don't get to go into and see a place, a normal election machine. But what you can do is go in, and if you haven't received your mail-in ballot, you can go and request one in person and fill it out and put it in a drop box right there. The value of doing that early is that one of the scary things will be is if at the time of the election, ballots are continuing to come in by mail. Those are the things that there's going to be a lot of dogma about. This is terrible. We can't count these. These are after election votes. If you get it in by early and your voting people have it, they will have it in their hand and they can get ready to count it. And so they can say, I have 417,000 ballots sitting here and to be counted, and that solidifies their position that these are valid ballots. You have to turn in, if you're going to drop it off in a drop box, it has to be in the county where you're registered. You can't decide, hey, I'm traveling past this drop box in a different county. Take it to your county so it will be counted by them and it will be in the right place. If you apply by mail but you do not receive your ballot in time, well, first, if you apply by mail and you have your ballot and for some reason you just feel like going into a voting booth, take that ballot with you to on your election day and hand them the unfilled in ballot on election day, and you can vote as a regular voter. If you have filled it in and mailed it in, but you're not sure it counted, this is the things that Donald Trump talked about, the double voting. If you've mailed it in, you can't decide to go in and vote in person. If you haven't received it and you go, but you don't have it in your hand, at the voting booth, they will give you a provisional ballot, but you won't be counted until they've checked to make sure you didn't fill in your voting. You can also, once you mail in your ballot or drop it in a drop box, you can trace it. You can go online to Votes PA and find out if they've received it. All of these things are designed to make you feel better, to make you feel secure. There are people like Gwen and so many other people throughout the county. There's going to be state legislators fighting for these things, Gwen and throughout the state, who are going to be fighting these things after the fact. But what we have to do is make sure that before the election day, we all vote.
Wendy, you got to talk to us a little bit about signatures, and there were certainly a lot of questions about signatures. Would people be notified if their signatures were rejected for any reason? And can they update it themselves?
There is a lawsuit, and I honestly do not have the update. There was a challenge to this stating that when people's signatures were rejected because they didn't match, that they did not have enough time to address that problem. I don't know the outcome of that. It was challenged because many people's signatures will alter through the years if you have a stroke, whatever. Someone noted that if you registered with your while getting your driver's license, you can look at your license and see what your signature looks like and try to make it match. But if not, you should be notified in a timely fashion that your ballot has been challenged. Apparently, this is not happening in a timely fashion. I do know from someone on the state government committee tried to have his challenge or have his signature altered and did exactly what was supposed to happen well in advance of the primary. He knew how to follow the rules. He did the rules. He did every process, and he was unable to alter his official signature. So this is a real squeeze point, and people may never find out that their ballot was discarded because they couldn't verify the match. I don't know the answer, and I can quickly Google to see if that lawsuit has been settled. I think it was sometime late August is not that long ago. But
we can find
Yeah,
out.
we'll follow up by email.
Follow up, yeah.
Ashley, so many of us are volunteering, have put in our names for poll workers, but what do you think is the volunteer work we can be doing that's going to ensure the greatest democratic turnout?
So I think the greatest work is, again, there are a number of organizations across our state who are actively calling, texting every person they know. A lot of programs have relational voter programs, which give us an opportunity to say, I'm not just calling some random person, but I'm starting by calling my friends and family. A lot of times when we're looking at the disinformation that's going out, a lot of times it's the people who are closest to us, and to make sure that we are sharing this message. I can share with the representative, I along with Gwen can share all of these volunteer opportunities with others, but again, I just think it is a matter of sharing this information, getting involved. One of the things is particularly looking at the challenges that we're facing from the other side. We are aware that they've invested $70 million in what they call election security, but really is voter disenfranchisement, who I think I saw in the chat section, people were talking about individuals from other counties and other states showing up in really in large urban areas where we're looking to garner a certain percentage of the vote. So the possibility that someone from the far northeast or from rural southwest could show up in Philadelphia on election day to really deter. So if you are in a position to volunteer, certainly encourage you to volunteer. If I saw that there's still places where they're looking for poll workers and poll watchers, and so again, we can share that information in certain specific opportunities. But I say, make sure that we again are making every effort to make every person in our family, all of our friends, that they know that vote by mail is safe and secure, and they should do it immediately.
Thank you, Ashley. We're going to go on to questions. I just want to tell you how panicked I am about this. Not only am I the executive director of Represent PA, I am also a volunteer on the PA Dems voter hotline. So I'm on this afternoon from 12 to 3 answering questions like these from voters all over. And the most exciting thing for me is hearing from voters in every county, or I've heard from a lot of counties that I've told that are still very red counties, and people are calling to say, I and my neighbors need to know the answer to these questions. So that I have volunteered there. I have signed up to be a poll watcher with several different organizations, and I have volunteered there. I've also volunteered with the PA Voter Services people to be an official poll worker. Haven't heard back yet. I've heard there's a big backlog of applications, but I'm just trying to think of what else I can do to make sure. I do not want to wake up a week after Election Day and find out that I didn't do enough. We're going to move on, and I think we've got a few of our candidates on the call who might want to say hello. Let's go on.
Go to Jill Denon first.
Jill Denon.
Hi, thank you, everybody. Yes, I think there is absolutely a lot of anxiety, and as someone who's been calling voters every single day, Christine, just a comment, what I have gotten from people is after yesterday's comment by the president, there are several people now who absolutely want to go vote in person because it's not because they're scared that their ballot's not going to count, but they're worried that it's not going to be counted until possibly weeks after. So I think, and this is to Representative Ullman, I think the biggest issue right now is the fact that we cannot, open envelopes and count early. We can't start counting until that morning. So, I know there's probably not much we can do about it, but I would just encourage everyone on this call and my fellow candidates just to get as much information out as possible to the voters. And I agree with you, Christine. We're being scared. It's working. The scare tactics are working because I talked to a lot of Democrats and now they don't want to use their mail-in ballot. So we need to keep pushing the message that it will be secure. And the more people that get out and vote, like Gwen said, we need to have a blowout. So thank you so much for all the work Represent has done. And Christine, you're absolutely right. Whether it's right, wrong, money matters in this election. So thank you for all of your support. And, I'm going to continue to work my tail off for the next however many days I'm losing track to make sure that I get elected, because having a Democratic legislature is going to be probably the most important thing that can happen right now. God forbid if he gets elected again.
Thank you, Jill. I want to remind everybody that I made a comment that take your ballot. If you decide you receive your ballot envelopes and decide you want to go vote in person, you have to take the whole package, the envelopes and the ballot. When I said ballot, I meant the whole package. Just want to make sure that's clear. We will take all of the questions, all the comments that we've raised. We will send a follow-up email to everybody who registered for this call. There's lots of resources to get answers, but I go back to Gwen's comment earlier. I go back to Wendy's comment earlier, go back to Ashley's comments. Feel safe in voting by mail, just get it in early. Get it in there so that I know, for example, in Philadelphia, they're going to be working 24/7 to count ballots once they're given the go-ahead to count them. Get it in there early and it will count and you will feel better. And that way on election day, when you have volunteered to go be a poll watcher or a poll worker, you can go do it because you know that you don't have to go to your polling place and stand in line to vote. This is a completely important thing to do. You can go out there and be a poll monitor if you've gotten in your mail-in ballot early. I thank you all. I know the news is scary, but do not sign up for this. Do not use Trump's words. Do not use Republican talking points about how this is not safe. It's safe because we're going to make it safe. It's safe because people like our speakers are making it safe for all of us. And we have to vote. So thank you very much to everybody.